But it is equally true that he did not borrow in toto. He was and still is highly selective in his borrowings. He modified what he has chosen from foreign traditions to suit his own way of thinking, believing, and doing things. Thus, while he outwardly shows the influence of the West in his behavior, the Filipino remains Oriental in his worldview. My second major argument holds that American imperialism had reinforced this veneration and worship for Rizal. I contend that American imperialistic campaign through the Taft Commission in 1901 was able to utilize power and ideology to create that perfect image of Rizal over Bonifacio, Jacinto, Del Pilar, and other Filipino heroes. By proclaiming Rizal as the Philippine national hero during the time when war between the Philippines and the United States of America was still in height, the Taft Commission succeeded in giving the Filipino people a national hero whose major thesis for reform was education, not a revolution. Thus, the sponsorship and the institutionalization of Rizal by the Americans played a major role in encouraging a Rizal cult. And how did it happen? The establishment of American colonial rule was based on policies and programs comprehensive enough to allow American presence throughout the archipelago. American colonial policies in the Philippines were expressed initially in the benevolent assimilation proclaimed by President William McKinley of the United States. In this proclamation, the U.S. declared her intention to establish sovereignty over the Philippines, but would endeavor to pursue a humane policy to assimilate the colony. Note that this declaration came after the formation of the Malolos Congress, the legislative body of the Philippine Republic under President Emilio Aguinaldo. Shortly thereafter, the Sherman Commission sent to the Philippines in 1899 to assess the situation, reiterated the American commitment to pursue a policy that would respect the customs and traditions of the Filipino people. This change in policy came at a time when tensions were moving toward the possible outbreak of hostilities, as the Malolos government showed its determination to attain Philippine independence. When the first shot was fired from an American gun at San Juan Bridge in Manila on February 4, 1899, killing a Filipino, the Philippine-American War had formally begun. What was more surprising to know that in 1901, during the height of conflict between the Filipinos and the Americans, Civil Governor Taft suggested to the Philippine Commission that the Filipinos be given a national hero. The Free Press, on December 28, 1946, gives this account of a meeting of the Philippine Commission. And now, gentlemen, you must have a national hero. In these fateful words, addressed by the Civil Governor Taft to the Filipino members of the Civil Commission, Tavera, Legarda, Arellano, and Zuriaga laid the genesis of Rizal Day. In the subsequent discussion in which the rival merits of the revolutionary heroes were considered, the final choice, now universally acclaimed a wise one, was Rizal, and so was history made. Governor General Cameron Forbes, who wrote in his book, The Philippine Islands, says, "It is eminently proper that Rizal should have become the acknowledged national hero of the Philippine people. The American administration has lent every assistance to this recognition, setting aside the anniversary of his death to be a day of observance, placing his picture on the postage stamp most commonly used in the islands and on the currency, and throughout the islands, the public schools to teach the young Filipinos to revere his memory as the greatest of Filipino patriots." Rizal never advocated independence, nor did he advocate armed resistance to the government. He urged reform from within by publicity, by public education, and appealed to the public conscience. Quoting James Leroy, who worked with the Second Philippine Commission, Renato Constantino, a nationalist Filipino historian, further emphasized that it is the imperialistic campaign of the Americans that fueled the creation of the Rizal cult. The Taft Commission did foster the worship of Rizal. They were glad in 1900 to have one way of giving expression to their sympathies with national ideals without appearing to favor revolt. Rizal and a national holiday for him was just the chance. Several factors contributed to Rizal's acceptability to the Americans as the official hero of the Philippines. First, he was safely dead by the time the Americans began their aggression, so no embarrassing anti-American quotations could ever be attributed to him. Second, Rizal's dramatic martyrdom had already made him the symbol of Spanish oppression. To focus attention on him would serve not only to concentrate Filipino hatred against the former oppressors, it would also blunt their feelings of animosity toward the new conquerors against whom there was still organized resistance at that time. Third, the Americans chiefly emphasized the fact that Rizal was a reformer, not a separatist, whose major thesis for reform is education, not a revolution. Such principle was highly congruent with the American imperialistic slogan embodied in the benevolent assimilation proclamation of President McKinley. Rizal could therefore not be invoked on the question of Philippine independence. He could not be a rallying point in the resistance against the Americans, but could be a great boost to the pacification campaign. And lastly, it must be realized that the Filipino members of the Philippine Commission were conservative illustrados. The Americans regarded Rizal as belonging to this class, to the right social class that they were cultivating and building for leadership. Yes, indeed, although Rizal was already a revered figure and became more so after his martyrdom, it cannot be denied that his preeminence among other Filipino heroes was partly the result of American sponsorship and institutionalization. In conclusion, it has been established that the Filipinos, the Rizalistas in particular, have viewed Christ within their cultural framework. Anitism, the worship of ancestors, has a long tradition in Philippine culture. To the spirits or anitos, Filipinos offered sacrifices and foods with the ministration of the babaylan, serving as shamans or mediums to communicate with the supernatural beings. Notwithstanding, they had been Christianized by the Spaniards and the Americans. They still have maintained their indigenous beliefs, or if not, have able to blend these outside religious outlooks with their own, constructing Rizal as Christ and reconstructing Christ as Rizal give us a clear idea that it is the people themselves who contextualize religion. Making Christ a Filipino validates the thesis that it is the Filipino people who finally decide what is meaningful and relevant to their spiritual and religious life. The picture of JOVE REX Rizal as Christ is based on what is meaningful and significant in the eyes of the Filipino believers. Thus, culture plays a central role in this, as culture colors the worldview of the people. On the other hand, American hegemony had significantly contributed to this veneration for Rizal by the Filipinos. Through legislations, education, and propaganda machineries, the American colonial officials had succeeded in creating Jose Rizal as a superhero whom every Filipino citizen should bow down to. Therefore, the American invasion and conquest of the Philippines had been fueled and facilitated by imaging and representing Rizal as the most illustrious Filipino who had ever lived, towering above all the Filipino patriots. Thus, I am buying the idea of Renato Constantino that Rizal cult had been encouraged by American imperialism in the Philippines. Thank you so much for listening. Maraming salamat po. Domo arigatou gozaimashita.